Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Hitscan. Yesterday an interview came out with Blizzard from Edge magazine. A few other YouTube channels have also covered this and gone over bits and pieces of news, but there's also quite a lot in this Edge magazine interview that people haven't mentioned that I think is really big and important, mostly about progression and the meta and why it's really good, so we'll get straight into it. This is a bit from the main interview that I did want to mention, specifically the wording of it as I found it quite interesting. And I wanted to quote this. Blizzard tells us that it wants the multiplayer meta to be in chaos when the new game launches. The studio wants the competitive scene to be in as much disarray as it was when Blizzard first added D.Va, Mei and Genji into the beta back in the day. I found this really interesting simply for the reason that Blizzard in the past has said that they would never release multiple heroes because of the problems that they had with D.Va, Mei and Genji. Now they're doing a full 180 and say that they want to cause that chaos for when Overwatch 2 launches. For those that don't know, Jeff Kaplan said back at BlizzCon that Overwatch 2 is going to launch with multiple heroes, like maybe 3 or 4 in total, which I think is really important and kind of concerning because a lot of the heroes won't be coming out in Overwatch 1's lifespan. They'll be held back until Overwatch 2 comes out, which I think can be a bit of a problem. And is it worth it? I don't know. The point is that Blizzard kind of want the game to be completely reset in a chaotic meta. So I can imagine there'd be huge hero changes in amongst this time as well. So Blizzard saying that they want their own meta to be in chaos and to be in as much disarray as possible, I think is really interesting to hear how they want to go about balance in the future. It also makes me wonder how that would correspond to the Overwatch League and all those bits and pieces, but it would make sense that the launch of Overwatch 2 would be a nice clean slate for Blizzard to change how healing or damage or barriers work in the game. I could see some drastic mega changes to how characters play in total because it would make sense going into a brand new game. But that's not all. There's in fact quite a lot of stuff in here. A lot of it was covered with Jeff Kaplan, that's the main bits of the interview that I've seen in other places, but I personally found the Aaron Keller section of this interview really important. Aaron Keller is one of the main producers of the game, one of the underlings I suppose for Jeff Kaplan, but still has a big impact in the game. One of the interesting areas in regards to Overwatch's future, both with 2 and beyond, is this question. When did you know that Overwatch 2 was going to be a fully fledged sequel? We asked this question to Michael Chu and Chaco Sunny, and they said, dunno really. That's kind of what the interview was like, but Aaron Keller gives a really good answer. Early on in Overwatch's development cycle, like in the first few months, we had a pretty solid idea of what the current Overwatch game was going to be. And just because we had come off Project Titan, which was this massive game, it was bigger than any game I ever worked on or ever heard of. There was just so many features in it. We had this philosophy that we wanted to start very focused with Overwatch, and we called the philosophy crawl, walk, run. And Overwatch was just going to be our crawl. And then we have another game that we were referring to as our walk, and that's kind of what Overwatch 2 has developed into. It's a game that is more than just players competing against each other. It's a much bigger game with a story, with a ton of content behind it, where players are kind of going through missions with each other against AI. And so we always thought of it as a big game. But after Overwatch shipped, with the success of it, it was not like it was ever really a separate game, Overwatch 2. But we quickly realised it was going to fulfill everything that Overwatch could be. Sorry about the quality of this as well, this is where it goes a bit Mr. Krabs mean on the sides, but Overwatch is at its heart a fast-paced, team-based shooter. We now have over 50 million players who have played this game. I think one of the amazing things about Overwatch though is that we have a lot of fans that don't even play the game. We'll come back to that. There are a lot of people out there that say I love Tracer, I love Mercy, but I just can't play such a competitive FPS game, but I love Overwatch and I love the universe. Can you make something for me to play? And I think Overwatch 2 is going to fulfill that for them, where there's this game that people that don't play competitive shooters can jump into and play it the way that Blizzard designs games. They're going to be able to play the co-op side of Overwatch 2 as their main lifestyle game. There is so much to that side of the game from this big story experience that we want to take people through as we see what Overwatch as an organisation is going to turn into and how they react to this massive global threat across the world. That's where they start talking about hero missions and progression, but we just covered quite a lot. What we just covered is really important for the future of Overwatch and basically where Blizzard's head is at with this game. Because Overwatch as a whole, its universe and where the game is going, it's going to become what Project Titan was meant to be. It's just Blizzard's changing scope on how they want to approach it. They've described Overwatch 1 as a crawl. That's crazy. And that Overwatch 2 is meant to be this walk, and then whatever's after that, whether it's an Overwatch 3 or whether they do the Destiny 2 style of Overwatch 2 will then have expansions Legends on top, which is what I'm assuming that's going to be its run. Where I think that to an extent we're going to have Overwatch in 5 or 10 years time be a game that's got just as much content, if not more, than the likes of Destiny and even World of Warcraft. That's definitely the sort of direction I think Blizzard is taking this. Now, of course, this has good and bad sides. The bad side is, what about the focus on PvP? It feels that Blizzard don't really care about this, and throughout this whole Edge interview, there hasn't really been that much conversation about it other than the whole changing the meta, making it into as much disarray as possible. It's going to be crazy that Overwatch had this big competitive audience, even its own esports scene, and then that becomes a bit of a subsection of a main game, kind of how like the PvP works in Destiny 2. Most of you that play Destiny 2 will know how unimportant PvP feels to a lot of players in a lot of senses. So that's a big concern. As a competitive player that loves to play FPS games like Overwatch and, you know, CSGO, Siege, whatever, that's a bit concerning for sure. And is that going to become more of a thing in the future? I don't know, but it certainly tells you where Blizzard's head's at with this. But I do think they hit the nail on the head. There's a good portion of the audience that loves the Overwatch games that aren't competitive players. I wasn't a competitive player when I started playing Overwatch, but, you know, because I covered a game, I kind of became one, and I'm personally glad that I did. So they are making a game for people that are very casual, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The more people into Overwatch, the better. Of course, I'm biased, I'd say that, but now I want to go over another big area that I was personally interested in. Progression, endgame. For the PvE side, I again saw Stylosa touch on this with Jeff Kaplan basically saying that they're working on endgame, which, fair enough, you kind of expected that. But again, Aaron Keller goes into so much detail, and he himself has made me worry less about Overwatch 2 and what that's going to look like. On the subject of PvE and progression and the likes, Aaron Keller talks about the deep progression system that players will see as they play through the hero missions. Our closest analogy to that right now is what Adventure Mode is to Diablo 3. That's what these hero missions are to us. So it's this massive tail to the game where people can play this for years if they want to, and for us, as we started talking about the game in those terms, it couldn't really be anything but a sequel. The second question is, how much have you consulted with the Diablo 3 team on these kind of mechanics? Aaron Keller said, we talk to them all of the time, we go to lunch, I'm good friends with a lot of people on the Diablo 4 team, and a lot of them were on the Diablo 3 team too. Another analogy we make is our hero missions are similar to world quests in World of Warcraft. One of the lead designers of that system and one of the lead designers on World of Warcraft is now on our team spearheading our progression system. That's really good news. So yeah, we have this experience from all across the company. We have designers from the Diablo team now working on our team, and then we have friends and colleagues that we're in constant communication with, kind of sharing our ideas with and getting feedback from them. This is really good news. Like, I was really concerned about what progression would look like, especially with how awful the progression system was in the Overwatch 2 stuff that we saw. Having cool abilities to choose from as you level up is cool, sure, but it needs to be much deeper. And this is something that Aaron Keller even said in an interview at BlizzCon, that they're nowhere near having the level of progression that they want, and it's a key area, and it just goes to show how much Aaron Keller gets it.
The progression system right now, it's designed to make your heroes feel more powerful. It's designed to make them feel more versatile, more tailored for you as a particular player, and it's designed to allow your hero to feel different from other people's heroes. And I think that it needs to be a pretty complex and deep system. Like, we want it to be a really deep and meaningful system to players. What we've shown so far at BlizzCon, internally we're calling it the talent system, and it's just one small part of our progression system. If you saw any of the panel, we showed a bunch of the different talents and what they can do to actually affect a player's abilities. Internally, we have multiple other systems that contain elements that players are using to change gameplay on them too. We're just not ready to show those right now, but the talent system isn't the only part of progression. There are multiple other systems that we're playing with in order to deliver this really deep and meaningful experience.
Going back onto the interview, what's your biggest thing that you've been able to take from your work on other games at Blizzard to apply to Overwatch? We had this philosophy on World of Warcraft that the world was the main character, and if you think about the game, especially the original one when it came out, there wasn't really any main protagonist, a good guy or a bad guy. It was all about exploring the world. That has really resonated with me and has stuck with me. Working on Overwatch, we started creating this really amazing world, and the thing that stuck out the most in the Overwatch universe was the heroes. The heroes are things that everybody, I think, can relate to. There are so many different personalities, all a little larger than life, that I think that people can look at those and really be inspired. But it's hard for us to really explore the world in that type of game. It's so fast paced that it's difficult to deliver story. We're able to take people to maps all across the world, they're all visually stunning and interesting, but it's hard to go beyond that. So that's one of the things I'm more excited about with Overwatch 2, is that we finally start exploring this world. It's such an important thing for us at Blizzard to create these worlds and let players walk around and explore them. And now we finally get to do that. On Overwatch 2, we get to take people through a big story, we get to introduce them to different characters, you get to see what these different characters' relationships with each other are, what their relationships to Overwatch are, and some of the main protagonists in the story. I'm really excited to be able to start doing that for our players. Again, it goes to show where their heads are, to the point that I can see the world being a completely open area that people can explore in future expansions of Overwatch 2, whatever that may look like, or just the future of the game in Overwatch 3. I feel like PvP is becoming less of the core aspect of the game, to more of a subset of what Overwatch 2 wants to be, and I'm not surprised. Overwatch is a universe that has a lot of people interested in, but the competitive, nasty side, I suppose, of the game has made it so people feel that they can't play it. And that makes me kind of sad as a PvP player, but I'm not at all surprised at Blizzard going in this direction. This interview tells you a lot of exactly where Blizzard are wanting to go with this. The idea of them wanting to make a sequel just because it's more money isn't necessarily true. They just know that Overwatch, the game that we're playing currently, can't compensate for its more casual audience. People love the characters, but they don't love long queue times, they don't love being flamed for playing their favourite heroes. People want to play Overwatch, but they don't want to play in a nasty competitive scene. So this is Blizzard's attempt to sort of usher away from that to make a hybrid game that appeals to everybody. If you're a hardcore PvP player like the majority of us are, the ones that are left at least, this is kind of bad news. Other than the meta being very up in the air when the game comes out, that might be quite exciting, but, you know, this is very interesting. But, you know, I can't blame Blizzard here, and certainly Activision Blizzard going, we have this huge audience that are really interested in the Overwatch universe that don't like playing PvP. Let's make this all-encompassing game that has PvP and PvE so it caters to everyone. You can't really blame them for doing that at all, I don't think, when they have such a successful game with World of Warcraft that has a really nice balance between PvE and PvP. But imagine if World of Warcraft was just a PvP game to begin with, that audience would be really annoyed at the fact that the majority of assets and time and effort and money from Blizzard are put into the PvE side of the game. Does that make sense? I think that's really important in its own right, and that's certainly why I wanted to highlight that here. A lot of the other stuff that Jeff Kaplan went over is fairly tame in comparison to the information it gives, but what Aaron Keller said here and previously is good news if you're a PvE fan. It goes to show that Overwatch 2's story mode and hero missions and all that, based on the people that are working on it, could actually be really, really, really good. Because it has Diablo and World of Warcraft people on there, and whilst Diablo does get a bit of a bad rep, it's still one of the best PvE games out there when it comes to progression. And World of Warcraft, well, very much the same. Legion especially had amazing stuff in there too. So I'm less worried about the PvE side of Overwatch 2, but I'm now more worried about the PvP side because there wasn't really any mention of it in that interview. There are some other bits and pieces that we may go over some other time. Maybe myself and Miska will talk about this more next week or something, because I think this is a really interesting talking point. But this is pretty big news, if I do say so myself. Thanks for watching, take care, see you then.